So again, thanks for the opportunity to share this with you today. I'm looking forward to being able to plumb your insights and get your thoughts on where we might want to head with this work and make sure that we're getting the word out. So you can go ahead and move to the next slide, Nora. So I know you know who COG is, but I'm doing this I put this in here just for the map of our membership area, just so we go as far west as Frederick County and as far southeast as Charles, but not all members, not all COG members are part of this collaboration. Go ahead, next slide. So today I'm going to start with a very brief overview of why fair housing matters, and then I'll discuss how COG has supported regional fair housing planning. And next I'll share the current members of the project team and advisory committee, give you the latest status, and I'll conclude with asking for your advice and input on how we can work together on this equity analysis and action plan. Before I get started though, I want to share we are very fortunate that Dr. Celissa Lambert-Woodard has agreed to be part of the Community Advisory Committee, and I'll pause to let her chime in during this presentation as well. And I have to apologize to Celissa, as some of this material is going to look familiar from the Advisory Committee kickoff meeting that we held in early August. So next slide, please.
Thanks, morning, Hilary. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I know you are all pretty well versed in the basic premise of why fair housing matters. So I'm going to be very brief and not go into the full history of fair housing, the passage of the Fair Housing Act, and why we still need to actively further fair housing to create truly inclusive communities. Simply put, where you live matters, right? Government housing policies have resulted in unequal and inequitable access to schools, jobs, transit, and healthy neighborhoods. The purpose of this regional fair housing collaboration is to work to identify those barriers to fair housing choice and create a plan to remedy them. Next slide. And this is a map from the no longer functioning HUD AFFH mapping tool as a reminder of how segregated our region is by race. Next slide. So in 1994, cities, counties, and states that receive federal funds through HUD have complied with the Fair Housing Act through the analysis of impediments to fair housing choice, also known as the AI. In 1997, COG completed one of the very first regional AIs in the country. In 2000, the US Government Accountability Office reported that HUD needs to enhance its requirements and oversight of jurisdictions' fair housing plans. The result, many years later, was a revised federal rulemaking process, which was completed in 2015. In 2016, COG staff, with Manuel Ochoa, who was at Enterprise Community Partners at the time, and Lisa Sturdivant, held a day-long symposium on preparing for the assessment of fair housing. The AFH replaced the AI and was the modified reporting format entitlement jurisdictions needed to complete. It did two things that were new and unique. One, it created a standard format the jurisdictions by size had to complete nationwide. And two, it had to be submitted and approved in advance of the consolidated plan. This tied fair housing planning to receipt of entitlement funds, giving it greater weight than it had ever had in the past. Following this event in 2016 and through the rest of 2017, COG and the members of its Housing Directors Advisory Committee began discussing collaborating together on the AFH. In addition to the two changes that I just mentioned, the AFH required each jurisdiction to include a comparison of its local conditions to the region. My pitch to the housing directors was, why would you want to pay the same 2 or 3 consultants 10 times to do the same analysis? Shouldn't we all do it together? Easier said than done, of course. Ultimately, however, we were successful and came to an agreement. We fully executed an MOU that we submitted to HUD, stating our intent to collaborate on the AFH in 2017, December of 2017 specifically. At the time, the collaboration included 9 entitlement jurisdictions and 4 standalone PHAs, plus the Fairfax County Redevelopment and Housing Authority, and the voucher-only public housing authorities, such as in Prince William and Loudoun counties. The participating jurisdictions agreed that we would seek an extension, and some jurisdictions consolidated planned start dates so that everyone was reporting in the same 5-year cycle. Not 1 month later, in January of 2018, HUD delayed implementation of the 2015 rule for local governments. At the time, the mapping tool for PHAs had not yet been published, so housing authorities were not compelled to complete the assessment of fair housing. They joined the collaboration to benefit from the local government participation and to avoid having to do it on their own in the future. This caused a significant amount of confusion. At the time, the delayed rule simply stated that local governments would not have to comply until after October of 2020. We had multiple calls with HUD's Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity Region 3 director to help us determine what this meant for us. The immediate consequence was that we were back to the previous analysis of impediments for fair housing planning. Ultimately, it also caused us to lose 2 municipalities to the collaboration, and in part Prince George's County. This was because CPD, Community Planning and Development at HUD, informed these localities that they would not be allowed to extend their program year start dates to be on the same 5-year plan cycle with the other participants. Prince George's County was also under pressure from HUD to remedy its past AI and was instructed to go ahead and not wait for the rest of the region to decide what it would do. For a number of months, it was unclear whether the region would decide to continue to collaborate or not. In the fall of 2018, however, we decided to move forward, and the participating jurisdictions through COG submitted a request to HUD for technical assistance. The HUD Region 3 FHEO director had indicated her willingness to support the collaboration this way. We knew we needed a consultant to complete the full plan, but wanted to take advantage of this offer to support the region's next fair housing planning effort. In July of 2019, HUD approved the request for TA and assigned Enterprise Community Partners advisory arm. In October of 2019, we had our first kickoff meeting with the project team members. I'll talk a little bit more about the composition of the team and where we are now in the next few slides. You can go ahead and advance. So this slide is just a summary of the federal actions in which these discussions have taken place. I already discussed the first 2 from 2018. But it's also important to note that in August of 2018, HUD issued a notice of public rulemaking for its AFFH regulation, inviting public comment. HUD received thousands of comments in response to the proposed rule. But rather than proceeding with a standard federal regulatory rulemaking process at the end of July this year, HUD terminated the 2015 rule and replaced it with a new rule through administrative fiat, circumventing the standard public comment process. The new rule is the preserving neighborhood and community choice, and was accompanied by some tweets about saving the American dream at the time. Briefly, it eliminates any requirement for jurisdictions to assess barriers to fair housing in their communities, engage fair housing groups or other stakeholders in that kind of assessment, adopt goals or implement strategies to overcome barriers, or document any actions taken to affirmatively further fair housing. In addition, under this rule, HUD will not conduct any monitoring or oversight of jurisdictions' compliance with the new rule or their AFFH obligations. Next slide. So that's the background that brings us to kind of where we are today and where we're headed. This slide represents the current members of the local government project team and its members. COG staff, that's me, is the convener and project manager. In Virginia, team members include Alexandria, Arlington, Fairfax, Loudoun, and Prince William counties. The team also includes the District of Columbia and Montgomery County and Maryland. HUD's Region 3 FHEO office, despite what's been happening at the highest levels of the administration, has been appointed a project manager who attends all our meeting, oversees the progress of the group with support from Enterprise, and has been a real champion of this effort and has really bent over backwards to provide us with assistance and to continue to encourage us to work together. This summer, we selected the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law to draft and complete the regional AI, including the local analysis for each jurisdiction. The Lawyers Committee partnered with the Urban Institute to focus on the data collection piece and ACHOA Urban Collective for the community engagement portion. Next slide. So this is an overview of the full partnership that's in place right now. One shift in the project team that occurred as the result of the suspension of the 2015 rules of the public housing authorities downshifted from being a member of the project team into an advisory committee role. Given that they will not be required to do a fair housing analysis unless there's a change in federal policy, we felt it was appropriate for them to be part of the team, but not required to financially contribute to the cost of the consultant. A recent addition to the full partnership includes a community advisory committee, which I will describe in greater detail on the next slide. You can move ahead. So during the spring and summer of 2020, the project team discussed how to ensure that it was gathering information in a way that reflected the views of those most impacted by fair housing choice. To HUD's credit, within Region 3 FHEO, they have been repeatedly and strongly encouraging meaningful and robust community engagement. The project team invited the organizations reflected here in this slide to represent a variety of residents impacted by fair housing choice. Most work in multiple jurisdictions, and some represent more than one critical group of residents. The categories included those who focus on African Americans, religion, national origin or limited English proficiency, people with disabilities, LGBTQIA+, homelessness, domestic violence survivors, and a category for cross-cutting organizations. One example of a cross-cutting organization is Pathways Homes, which works with people experiencing homelessness, as well as people who have serious mental illness or other co-occurring disabilities. The aim for this group is not to represent the sum total of the project's community engagement strategy, but rather to create a bridge to more locally focused groups and help provide guidance and insight to the project team on materials from everything from the most basic overview handouts all the way to the final draft regional plan. On the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about what the Community Advisory Committee's role is and ask Celissa if she might be willing to share a few thoughts about Pathways' role in this effort. Next slide, please. So the project team and its consultants will involve the advisory committee in completing the plan. Specifically, they will ask for feedback on how, where, and what materials we are using to engage communities, how we're collecting data, and what local sources of information might already exist that we should incorporate, and to review and comment on any draft documents. One of the most critical parts of the advisory committee's role will be to help prioritize impediments once they are listed, as well as the strategies to overcome them. And I should say that the Community Advisory Committee has met exactly one time. We did not go into any great detail about any of the project specifics, but Celissa, if you wanted to sort of briefly jump in on your thoughts about why fair housing matters to you and to Pathways, I would appreciate it and would like to invite you to say a few words if you'd like.
Absolutely, Hilary. Thank you. We've been able to come on board as a member of the Regional Fair Housing Advisory Committee. As Hilary had mentioned, we've only had one meeting, but during that meeting, I have to say I was really well educated, even more so alarmed, and recognizing the significance of stripping the AFFA. I think that there's been this perception of AFFA as sort of a Trojan horse for social reengineering when it comes to zoning in communities, and that's extremely threatening, obviously, to the individuals that we're serving in so many ways. Those barriers exist, they're key, they're covert, and if there is an assessment and awareness of those, it will continue to impact certainly all of our clients in ways that prevent them from accessing those services that they need to be able to have an equitable access to the community. So I think right now, I can just say with the first meeting, very excited with the individuals who are there. I think the planning piece has been one where we are looking at being able to ensure equitable resources, and we're looking at being able to set our goals and data collection at this point, and developing materials for engagement. So very excited about where this particular advisory committee will be able to impact the intersection that's going on in regards to the lack of affordable housing and the lack of needed analysis.
Thanks, Liz. I really appreciate your willingness to share this with us, and I have to echo, how excited I am to have these incredible group of organizations represented. who I think will really have a significant impact on the final product, which is where I'm hoping we'll get to that in a few minutes. And so thank you again for your time and your thoughts and your willingness to be part of this effort in this way. Go ahead to the next slide. Unfortunately, ultimately, what we intend to create is a 5-year action plan using the current framework of the AI. The main elements are described here. The first component is sort of analyzing the impediments, which you can see listed here on the screen. Secondly, creating an action plan to address those identified obstacles. And then the final part is, maintaining records to demonstrate compliance and progress in meeting the goals and strategies created in the plan. The project team, together with the consultants, will be responsible for creating the plan for each local jurisdiction, as well as an overall regional plan. Next slide. And this visual I included just because I appreciate how well it captures what I think is ideally a virtuous cycle of collaboration, partnerships, and participation that continuously informs and guides action to increase housing equity. Next slide, please. So this slide is a snapshot of the key tasks in each phase in our rough project schedule. Phase 1, where we are now, needs more work to flesh out the community engagement and outreach strategy, but is otherwise close to being completed. The advisory committee will be important for the engagement piece of this work. Phase 2, which I hoped would be well underway by now, focuses more on data collection and analysis. The existing conditions report is the task that I wanted to hand off to the consultants last month, but is delayed in part due to some last minute changes with the intergovernmental agreement that outlines the financial and contractual details of the project and how it would be formally approved. Here I would like to just thank HUD for the monkey wrench it threw at us at the end of July. At this point, I hope we'll have the consultants under contract during the month of October. The delays we've run into, plus the changes HUD made, have pushed back the planned completion date of the regional AI. Phase 3 will build on the existing conditions report to develop the actual goals and strategies. We're aiming to have a draft that we can share publicly in the fall next year and finalize by the end of 2021. Next slide. So this leads me to where we are today, and my hope is that you'll have ideas to share with us as we move forward. And also I hope you'll share information when we have draft documents to review, and that you will push us to make ambitious goals and then hold all of our partner governments accountable. At this point, we'd like to open it up for any questions, suggestions, and ideas that you may have.
Thank you, Hilary. Are there any questions? I will note that there is a formal adoption of the MOU by jurisdictions, that Arlington adopted it in July, Alexandria adopted it last week. It is on the docket for Fairfax County, and I'm assuming that the other Virginia jurisdictions will formally adopt this. So we are pleased that that formal step has happened or is happening. Are there any questions? Conrad.
Yes, first of all, thank you, Hilary, for an excellent presentation. I wanted to, emphasize and remind all of us of the important connection between fair housing, equitable housing, equity, fairness, and the supply of affordable homes. As long as we are squabbling over the meager supply of affordable homes we have, it's hard to be equitable and fair. And therefore, the question of supply, dramatically and drastically increased supply is very important. So, Hilary, my question to you is, congratulations to the Council of Governments on the goals that you put forward for the region. And as all of us know, various of the jurisdictions have been signing on to those goals, some with more vigor and leadership than others. But I wanted to get your reaction to where, from your perspective at the Council of Governments, you think the question of increasing supply of affordable homes is particularly from the standpoint of the goals that COG has set.
Absolutely. No, that's a great question, Conrad, and I think you've really hit the nail on the point. I think it's important to me from the COG perspective. We take the regional supply goals are sort of fundamentally where we need to push to address the meager supply that we currently have. But I think where it's important to not conflate, and I think this is where HUD has made a mistake, is that they're conflating affordable housing with fair housing. Right? They are definitely related. But we want to make sure. I think this gets to in the COG goal of accessibility, like where are the location, where are we building these? We want more supply, but where is the supply going, right? We want them in, in places where we have existing infrastructure, where we have access to schools, jobs. We're not further segregating, we're not creating further concentrating areas of poverty. And so to me, this takes the broad sort of regional supply goals and gets right down to the nitty gritty about, okay, we need the supply, but where are we building it? How are we building it? And how are we ensuring access? And so I think they're complementary and build on each other. I think they're both essential to making sure that when that we not only meet the housing needs of the residents, but we do it in a way that mitigates past housing policy decisions that segregated our communities.
Well, thank you, and we certainly appreciate COG's leadership and hope that you can continue to guide us and provide us with information, particularly and especially, I think, in the area of how we can update and modernize our zoning procedures, policies, land use policies, so that we can continue to grow. I mentioned the San Francisco example at the beginning of this discussion today. Not all of you were on at that point, but I described how the city of San Francisco is turning a publicly owned large parking lot in the southwest part of the city into residential use, including a lot of affordable homes. Affordable homes in San Francisco, that's an oxymoron. They're trying, and I therefore would strongly encourage COG to take a much stronger leadership role when it comes to helping us at the local level to do similar kinds of things.
I will try, but I count on you guys to help be the wind beneath my wings.
Other questions for Hilary or comments? Nina?
I'll just say, yeah, this is very exciting, Hilary, and I think all of us need to jump in and be ready to play a role. It sounds like your first phase is really more data collection, this AI stage, analysis of impediments, but keeping this available to us and making sure that you keep engaging us. I assume a big part of this will be being more aggressive on mixed income housing in areas of opportunity. And I think NVAHA has a long track record in that. And so do a lot of folks in this, in the Leadership Council. So hopefully we can do more.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And I would appreciate, when you are, when we get a little bit further on and we're doing more targeted community engagement, would really appreciate your thoughts in terms of, how we can reach, a wide variety of residents, so that we're really sort of ground truthing our ideas about what the real obstacles are and what the solutions look like.
Hi, this is Michelle Winters. To follow on that, Hilary, you mentioned you've got these two different consultants, one working on data analysis and the other on community engagement. Is there some more that you can share about the scope of the community engagement and what are you expecting that particular contractor to do, and how might we be able to plug into it, or what will we be seeing over this next several months?
So that is we're working on finalizing that piece right now. It looks admittedly a little different by jurisdiction. Yeah, the goal is to have a more develop a meeting in a box sort of materials that can be standardized across the region. We're working on those draft documents, actually sending them, and we'll be giving the community advisory committee first crack at making sure that they look good and make sense. At this point, the idea is to sort of take advantage of where there's existing housing engagements planned. Arlington County, trying to leverage the Housing Arlington platform to a certain degree. Now, I don't want to get sort of too far afield. I'm not going to get too far afield from your question, but Arlington County, as a side note, has actually already done its local data collection and analysis because they had some funds left over, and they did they use an existing contract that they added a rider to do some work. So at this point, they already have draft goals and strategies that haven't ruled them out yet. So we're working on coordinating with them in terms of how to do that in a way that's complementary with what the other jurisdictions are doing. So this is a long way of saying is that right now the strategy is jurisdiction by jurisdiction, but we're working on trying to knit together a more coherent cross-jurisdictional broad messaging strategy that will be informed by the Community Advisory Committee at their next meeting. And to be honest, this is where we want to plug in the consultant. This is where Manuel is going to come in, and Manuel Ochoa is going to sort of help sort of take the lead in implementing that. But because of these recent delays with our contract and our legal side, we have not been able to do that officially yet. So I think in the coming months, there'll be more, hopefully we'll have I can share more details on how to do that. But we're just in the meantime, when if it's all right, happy to share via Michelle when there's things that are coming, and then on our trying to keep our website webpage updated as well with what might be happening.
I see someone else on a 624 number. I don't know who that is. Did you want to say something or have a question?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Hilary, I just wanted to ask, I know we're still in the process of collecting a great deal of data throughout the region, and I was thinking about the eviction moratorium that's going on and a host of things that's occurring within our region. Are there specific documents or reports that perhaps NVAHA has that might be useful to share during our data collection process?
There probably are. I know I'm gonna defer. Absolutely. So I think before I defer to Michelle here, I think one of the great things that I really appreciate from our first meeting was identifying other already existing local sources of information, so that we're not contributing to data collection fatigue by anyone, local government or nonprofit partner otherwise. So the fact that I think it was George Lambert from the Urban League had mentioned a report that was coming out, and we're like, oh, that's fantastic. And another report that I'm going to be sort of shedding around, I think from NCRC, that Dipti Pitty Smith from Northern Virginia Legal Services brought forward. So I think absolutely, and I think the Community Advisory Committee is going to be in some ways provide some of the most valuable leads in terms of information that's available locally that we may not otherwise immediately sort of come to mind. And I'm sure that there are resources that NVAHA has that will be important to incorporate in the data collection and analysis. I don't know, I'm gonna hand over to Michelle. I don't know if you wanted to add anything there.
Now, Hilary, I was going to say that please consider and use NVAHA and the Leadership Council as a touch point for this data collection. There's quite a bit that comes across my desk that isn't always reflected in all the meetings that we do and all the discussions that we have, but we would very much like to be a partner with you and COG in this endeavor because it is so important for all the reasons that have been discussed and important in our advocacy work going forward as we move out of COVID into whatever the next iteration of our world looks like. So we look forward to working with you, to being a resource, to being a touch point. We hope that you will continue to give us appropriate updates, and we're here to participate and be helpful.